Well, hello, everybody. It's Larry Young again. And today's segment of OLaMan, I want to introduce you to my good friend, Alex Fiato.
Good to be back.
Alex will be on me regularly as far as keeping me straight with doctrine in the church and things like that, because as a lot of folks may realize, I'm not a real churchy guy, but fortunately for you, me, and everyone else, Alex is in a little bit, a lot more than I am. So I'm not going to try to put him into one little box right here because he's a man of many, many, many talents. But Alex is here and on the job, and you'll be seeing a lot of him. We have a lot of other prepared episodes that we're ready to release out here when we were doing some ramp up to what we're doing right now. But we're going to release those. They were early test runs,
yeah,
right?
Sure.
We were trying to get the timing and the pattern down. Yeah. And we'll be releasing those. We'll go back and we'll redo those topics again. There's more to add to it. But there'll be some great viewing there for you that you can binge watch if you want to. They're in smaller 10-minute segments, but they all run together. But there's some great educational elements in there. So you're going to be seeing those coming up here very, very soon. But I wanted to get Alex in here to introduce him to you, our audience, and to talk about a couple of things that I talked about in our last segment there when I was talking about the elements of purity in our lives, in our family units especially. And one of the things that I want to drill down on a little bit today is the fundamental application of the Immaculate Conception in North America and how that all started and how fundamental that is to why the United States in particular is here. And so let's go back in the Wayback Machine a little bit. I want to jump back to 1492. And there was a little event that took place there between three sailing ships that left the port of Spain under Christopher Columbus, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. Now, this excursion had been shopped around by Columbus for quite some time, and he finally found a patron in the Queen of Spain who decided that she would go ahead and fund this excursion, but she didn't have any money. But she did have jewels. So what she did was she pawned her crown jewels in order to fund Columbus's excursion to what ended up being what we call the New World. But their goal in her fundamental financing of this was twofold. One was to go and find a more expedient route to the West Indies so they could get their trade routes more affordable, more profitable, and to be able to run more frequently. So they looked at, if we went west, maybe we get there faster. So this was an experiment. But the other part of that, it was probably the overlying pull that the Queen wanted to have, was she wanted to go and find souls and have them saved. And so she sent missionaries along with each of the boats. And on each of the ships, I believe there was a priest on each one of them. I think that was what the plan was, because they wanted to be able to deliver the Eucharist and the Mass to the sailors and especially the captains along the ways, because they were seeing the Immaculate Conception, that being the other name for the Blessed Mother, to be on these ships in his presence as not as a Jesus-type figure, but as a helpful guide and reminder for these people that they were held in regard by the Blessed Mother in heaven itself. And so they were using the protection of the Immaculate Conception sort of like as a shield as they went forward, a shield in faith, if you will. Now, they weren't worshiping Mary, but they were seeing Mary as a conduit, as a direct conduit to Jesus, her son. And so they saw the value in having this advocate along with them, because they weren't so presumptuous to say that Jesus could be with them all the time. They were mindful of that, but they were hoping that the presence of the Blessed Mother along with them would help shield them from some of these problems that might befall them at sea and ultimate disaster. So they were hopeful and mindful of these things, so that's why they took her along. And so that was their number one mission statement. Now, and when they returned back, they were all happy and celebrating these facts, and one of the ways they did that was with a Holy Mass, a Holy Mass of thanks back on the Spanish soil. So that was one of the first official acts that the Queen did with Christopher Columbus and the surviving members of that particular excursion. So the prominence and the placement of the Immaculate Conception along the way is very, very critical to the design and the purposeful intent, I believe, of the Blessed Mother in establishing the North American continent. And I'm going to jump ahead. In 1693, there was the first diocese formed in the North American continent, and that was in Quebec. And in Quebec, what that bishop did was he basically consecrated all of the lands of North America as he set up this diocese in the French province there for to be under the direction and the consecration to the Immaculate Conception, knowing that if they consecrated all this to the Blessed Mother, she was going to bring her son with her in this regard. And so they felt that, they saw that, and they saw it as being a basic protective device that they would have in their not only their physical but their spiritual development of these lands. Now I'm going to jump ahead also then to when the first diocese was started in what is now the United States area, with still the colonies, and I think that was 1793. Was that my date? Yeah. Was Baltimore, the Diocese of Baltimore was established. And that was done by Bishop John Carroll. And Carroll, as well, consecrated all the lands of the colonies and anything that would be developed and made part of the colonies to be under the consecrated blessings of the Immaculate Conception. Under the same reasoning, 100 years later, after the Quebec diocese was formed, the same reasoning, using the Blessed Mother as sort of a shield and a battering ram as they made their way through. Because when they came in Baltimore, they started going through the river systems, which brought them into the interior lands of the mid-American continent. They would follow down through the Ohio River and the other tributaries to try to move into these areas for settlement. So if you see the natural progression of things that happened, a lot of it went through these interior waterways and followed along to the path of the Kentucky River, or the Ohio River, which ran into Kentucky, which I was trying to get to. And so they weren't looking at the Immaculate Conception as being Jesus, because they were always just thinking that the Immaculate Conception was like a road builder and a safety gate for them to move in through their lines of infiltration to try to bring not only their own homesteading work, but also to bring Jesus to the salvation of the souls that they found along the way. So that was the reasoning for that. Now, Catholics have said we don't worship the Blessed Mother, but we ask her help. And we're always asking her as like being a good lawyer for us. If we have to go stand before the magistrate and we got a charge against us, it would be kind of foolish to show up on our own. Right. And so you always want to have somebody along there that can help speak for you. And that's how we look at the Blessed Mother as being an advocate for us, because although we have a great love and admiration for her as the Mother of our Lord, we also recognize that there's another person or element that can't stand her and can't stand to be in the same area with her, and that's the devil himself. Now, hopefully we all believe that there's a judgment day that's coming for us, that we all have to stand in reconciliation for our lives that we led and the things that we did. And at that meeting that's going to be coming up, there's one person or one entity that wants to be there to speak bad about you. But this same person can't stand to be in the same presence as the Virgin Mary. So we ask that the Virgin Mary be with. And when we pray the Hail Mary, there's 2 times that are mentioned in that life, or in our lives, that are mentioned in that prayer. There's now and the time of our death, that we ask her to be with us. And so if we live in the element of now, in a constant state of now, we're asking her to always be with us. So don't live in the future, don't live in the past, live in the now. And this is where you get things done, and you're asking her to be with you now and at the time of our death. And so if we ask her to be with us now, and we live in the now all the way, she's going to be with us our whole way in our path up until the time of our death. And at the time of our death, that's when our trial will be, if you will, our judgment. And so what I want is I want any witnesses against me to not show up.
No, absolutely. Larry.
And what happens if your witnesses don't show up to testify against you? All the charges are dismissed.
Right.
Typically. Depends what courtroom you're in these days.
Yeah.
So,
sometimes
has been the typical, but it all depends what's happening. It depends if you're in New York right now. But we're asking for a common sense, and we're asking for her help in being there for us, to speak for us. Because if she's there, the devil can't be there, and then it's just up to you. And the Blessed Mother would say to Jesus, Son, I've known this person all their life. They've been with me. They love you. They may have erred, but it's a good person, and I know this child.
And Jesus refuses nothing that his
Jesus
mother
can't
asks
turn his mother down. No. I mean, what good son would turn his mother down on anything? So Jesus loves his mother. He wants us to love his mother as he does too. And he wants us to understand that. So we're not putting Mary on the same level as Jesus. That's why in all the churches and things like that, Mary will never be above Jesus in any display. If you ever see that, you got to call it out. That's wrong. Jesus is always the highest point in any church you go to. Right. You always have to make sure of that. So Jesus is the ultimate goal here for all of us, and that's one thing that we share with all of our Protestant faithful, but I think a lot of times they have a misunderstanding about what the role of Mary is in our lives. Yeah. So hopefully I explained that. If there's any questions on that, shoot them to me, and I'll try to dial down back on that. But
some of the questions I think people might have is that they say, well, Larry, my experience with my mother was not very good. She did this and that and the other thing, and we don't remember her ever doing things for us. Now, how do these people relate to?
Well, these people are broken, and I'm sorry for their path that was given them, but that doesn't mean that there's not room for a good model in that. And I'm sorry if you had a bad relationship with your own mother. I can't share that. But in trying to heal some of these people, I think the only way is to try to explain to them and to get them to try to understand it. And if they can't relate to their mother, maybe they can relate to a male figure. And that's one of the blessings that we get with following the example of the Blessed Mother is she comes as a 3-pack. She comes as a Holy Family. And as the Holy Family, she had her valiant spouse, St. Joseph, and her son in our Lord, Jesus. And they are the Holy Family. And in this call to purity that she asks of us with the devotion to Our Lady of America, she's asking us to emulate the Holy Family in our own families. Try to have this sense of regard and love for each other that just can't be broken. No matter what we do, we set these expectations for each other, we deliver on those expectations, and we exceed those expectations. We do this out of a concentration of love and respect and admiration that we have and hold for each other. Holy family members and good family members are each other's biggest fans. They're at their games, they're at their things, they celebrate their wins, they console each other with the losses, whatever they may be in life. That's what holy families do for each other. But they're always there to help pick the other members up and move them forward, say, hey, look, it's not that bad. Come on, we're going to keep moving. These types of things. Because everyone has a down moment. But a good relationship with your family and all these things. I might be dialing in on another problem that people don't have. I didn't have a good relationship with my family. Okay, now we got an even more difficult case to try to heal. But everyone is recoverable. Our Lady knows this. She thinks that every soul is recoverable. She wants a perfect record. She wants them all. So she says we're all redeemable.
So if somebody were to say, I can't relate to a mother with the goodness because that was not my experience. If they were to go to the Blessed Mother, would she respond to them in a way that would help that healing and renewal?
Well, I think of course she would. Like any good mother or any person who's compassionate and caring, they would too. But this person who's broken has to be willing to open up and allow this touch upon them. And a lot of times, I work with dogs. and I took in a broken dog this last fall, and she's been kind of a problem. She was an older dog, had bad owners, had a lot of bad habits. But in trying to work with those things, I've been trying to bring her around to being a good dog so she didn't have to be put down like they were going to do when I got her. But what she needed attention. She needed tough love. She needed discipline. And this is what I think a lot of people also need in our world right now. They haven't been given discipline or expectation of these things. And so they've been kind of raised feral without any kind of guidance on this stuff. And they've given up their opinion and their leadership to an opinion that shows up on the internet someplace that they follow.
So life becomes confusing.
Life becomes confusing, and they're living it drop by drop of what the next installment is off of someone off of a website or something like that, or some popular celebrity. They do what they do, not what they know that they're supposed to do. So we're kind of jumping around a little bit, but Our Lady is there for us, and she's a good mother, and these are all great questions. If you come from a broken situation, how do we get to these people? And I think the only way you can in that way is with a slow and steady and constant immersion into good examples. And that's where our ultimate life of purity and yours in your own homes and lives comes about and casts a really warm shadow for these people. Your love and your consideration washes over them.
It makes a difference.
And they lead by your example. This is what I call feather strokes. Quiet examples. With the dogs, in training this one dog, if I yelled at her or anything like that or raised my voice, that went into a shutdown mode and she wouldn't listen to anything else because that's what her previous owners did. And so I realized that yelling at her wasn't going to do any good. She didn't respond to that except in a negative way. And so what I realized was I just stopped yelling at her, and I just started saying, thank you, and talked to her. I said, please don't do that. And when she not doing it, I said, thank you. And so I went to just thank you, and I stopped yelling at her because it just didn't do any good. It was just making us both in a bad mood.
Right.
And so I started, and the dog didn't know what to think about it. But all of a sudden, the dog liked that, and the tail started wagging and started understanding. A smart dog, she just had bad training.
Right.
So I have to get rid of the bad training and reinforce it with the other. But through feather strokes, I was able to win this dog over. And
it sounds like more of a, it was a tougher love than yelling.
It was harder on me.
Yeah.
Okay, and it took more resolute understanding out of me because I was the problem, not the dog. Okay, but I didn't know the dog,
right?
And so, but I was the problem.
They're like his kids. These two dogs are. They yell at him. They don't know what to do. They're tormented and sad.
Well, they're good dogs, but they just had bad. Well, the first one had bad direction, so we're working on that. But people are like that too, and that's I said the other installment earlier in this. I said, don't yell at people. Just have your discussion points down and calmly deliver them. And if they don't accept them or they won't return that graciousness, you're free to walk away. But don't walk away in anger or anything like that because you're going to lose everything you worked for in that situation. So it's better to walk away quietly and with resolve and let them learn from it, and you will too. But hold your head up. Know what you're on the right path with here. Our Lady's with you. Ask her help, and she'll help you with the words on these things then too. So, but I want to get back to we had the Diocese of Baltimore was started in 1793, and in that time, John Carroll then declares the lands for Our Lady, the Immaculate Conception. Now, that's 1793. Now, a lot of things happened before that. And I wanted Alex to talk about a situation that happened with General George Washington in regard to this, and an event that happened with him while he was at Valley Forge on a terrible night. The being shut down, they were out of supplies. Men were weak and weary. It was cold. Was it Christmas time?
Yeah, I believe so. It was in December. Yeah, I think
so. It was Christmas time, and everyone was kind of down, and they were needing help. And Alex had a wonderful story about what happened with George Washington. So I want him to kind of tell you about
General
that.
Washington went to the thicket, and he prayed to our good Lord, do you want this nation? Because at the time, the British Army was pretty much in charge of everything. As Larry explained, the soldiers were starving and they were cold and they weren't paid. And so he prayed to God, do you want this nation? And he'll continue to do what he can to win the freedom of the colonies. He went to his tent and he gave strict orders he was not to be disturbed. And then he tells a story about a singularly beautiful woman that came into his tent. And he looked at her and he asked who she was, and she would not tell him who she was. And he asked 2 or 3 times. He said, well, I would have asked again, except that I became basically paralyzed. And this singularly beautiful woman showed him the destiny of the United States. And she took him through the Revolution, and he understood the Revolution. He was in it. And she told him that they would be victorious. And then she took him through another period, which he might have been faintly could wrap his mind around, and that was the Civil War. And during the Civil War, the war between the states, I think we lost 670,000 men and women, and countless more that were maimed. And that would be resolved. And then she took him through a third period, and she said that the third period would be the worst period in the United States. And so he saw the difficulties that was going to happen in the United States. The destiny of the nation, eventually she showed him a vision that the United States was surrounded in the third period by darkness, and that many nations, if not all, were against the United States. And she talks about the closing of the ranks, which is somehow the people of the United States begin to grasp their faith and their prayers, and that they would renew the battle, and that eventually the United States would be victorious in that period. So she's given us a vision to General Washington, and a lot of people would say, well, that was probably the Blessed Mother. Probably it was her, but who knows who it could be, because she wouldn't reveal to him who she was. And probably there was reasons for that. But at any rate, the good news is that this nation will be a bastion for Christianity and for the freedom of the world. And Our Lady, I would say, if I were to guess who she was, not only to the end of the age, but she says to the end of the world. So this nation is being put in place with the Immaculate Conception, Mother Mary, and Jesus and the Holy Family to guide us through these difficult times. So for those folks out there, I would say go to the internet and look up General Washington Vision 1777 Valley Forge. And don't put in Mary, because it'll take you off into areas that is not pertaining to this vision. And so go ahead and read that, and then we'll give you more and more stories and how we found out that was actually an event that occurred. Some of the people were contemporary mystics with Larry, and Larry met these people and discussed certain things. But it's a fascinating story, and we'll slowly bring this forward. And
oh yeah, we're just trying to give an overview right now. We're setting up a timeline. We're going to go back and put more leaves on the trunks of this tree here for you, but to try to get to today's situation versus where we were back then. The main thing about today's episode is I want to say that there was purposeful intent, I believe, by heaven above with the establishment of this continent, what the design was for this great, what they called experiment.
Yeah.
Right now. And right now we're being tested, and we want to make sure that people understand where the reasoning is and our logic going forward in some of the things we're going to talk about, is we firmly believe and understand that these things were part of the original recipe in the DNA that heaven wanted for this continent. And that's, the protection of Our Lady and the fundamental drive towards a life in respect and following that of Jesus. And that is why we were one nation under God. And there's a lot of people right now out there in our world that want to drive God out of the discussion. There's a definite drive right now to try to start having even constitutional amendments to take things out. This is their ultimate goal, to drive God out of the discussion and out of our Constitution and out of this expectation that we have and how we're going to live our lives. Because if they can't drive God out of the discussion, they can't make themselves to be the ultimate provider for people. And one of the things we need to keep in mind is Thomas Jefferson, one of our great founding fathers, had said that one of the things he was concerned about was big government. He says, any government large enough to give you everything you want is large enough to take it all away. And he was very, very concerned about that. So he was all about self-reliance and these types of things, of being able to take care of your family and move yourself together as a strong family unit. And so the family is the backbone of our country. It's a backbone of our church. It's just our backbone. So work on your families. Like I said in the previous episode, don't be afraid of this, but be responsible and be aware of what is going on. And we're going to talk more about these things in our next episode. But I want to thank Alex for talking about this today. And we're going to be back with more on this, and we'll drive things forward. So if you have any questions, feel free to send them through here to heyolaman@gmail.com. We will answer those things. And in the meantime, we'll be back with more, so stay tuned. And Alex, I want to thank you for being a part of this thing here. And I want you all to remember, I love you. And I love you, Alex.
Thank you, Larry. I love you.
And we're going to make this work. We'll see you next time.